And I'm on. Okay. Today I want to talk about and begin talking about some things that, frankly, we don't often talk about, and we don't even really think about it too much. The typical way we imagine our duties as outlined in the commandments, for example, it relates to our duties of me to God and me to other individuals. Highly individualistic, as though humanity is a collection of individuals and God, and moral obligation runs between individuals and God and individuals and one another, and that's it. But actually, when you look at the moral order that God establishes, and also just the practicalities of how life actually works, is that there's this whole class of things we tend to neglect or ignore, things to which we owe duties, things which have duties to us, things which are not individuals. I'm calling them institutions. And I want to look and develop for a while the fourth and the eighth commandments and their broader understanding, the relationship to one another, and what they really tell us about obligations and duties. Fourth and eighth commandment. The fourth commandment, honor your father and mother. Now, we've talked about this before, that honoring your father and mother does not refer only to one's father and mother, but actually there's a whole broad range and scope of things for which mother and father are a stand-in. Like with the other commandments, the particular specific commandment is almost always a very sharp and focused example of the most important, either the most egregious example of failing to do what God wants, or the most important and penetrating example of what God wants, rather than commandments that are meant by themselves to sort of tell the whole story. They're stand-ins for a whole bunch of stuff. So the fourth commandment regarding mother and father obviously is talking about our mother and father, but it's also talking about our grandparents and great-grandparents. It's also talking about previous generations. It's talking about what's come down to us from the past, and we are to honor. Essentially, it's like this, that when you were born into a world that was already operational, that already was filled with all kinds of things you had nothing to do with, things that are absolutely necessary for you to thrive. You didn't create them, you were the beneficiaries of them. We can call that heritage. Your heritage has landed in your lap, been bubbling up for hundreds, and in some cases thousands of years. It comes to you through your parents. You are the beneficiary of that. You as a child, before you could do anything, it was already there for you. Like the cradle or the bed you were laid in. Absolutely necessary for you to thrive, and you had nothing to do with it. Our mothers and fathers in this commandment are stand-ins for not just their personal authority, but for everything that they bring to you. The authority not only runs to the past, the previous generations, and the wisdom that has allowed you to live in the world in which you live, but it also, parents are also stand-ins for the entire structure of authority above you. After all, outside the walls of your home and outside the authority of your parents is the authority of a larger family, the authority of a whole community, the authority of the entire government in the world, all the authorities that make society stable and that allow you as a little tiny baby to be safe and to flourish and to grow up and to enter into a world filled with heritage and authority which you had nothing to do with, but which now that you're here, you have an obligation to receive to maintain, and to pass on. Okay? So the fourth commandment is about our heritage and about the whole social order, which is embodied in our parents. And that's why the Ten Commandments focuses on the parents, because in them is everything as far as in some embryonic form. It doesn't start with government, it starts with parents. Now, so that's the fourth commandment, and that deals with the society that we have, that was bequeathed to us, and that is running and operational because of the powers that be and because of the wisdom that has come down to us embodied in our parents. The eighth commandment, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, is a commandment about justice. And it may not seem like that at first, but when you think about that, you'll realize how it is a commandment about justice. In the first place, to say that the commandment is just that you shall not tell lies is to miss the point entirely. Yeah, you shouldn't tell lies, but it's a little bit like saying that the fifth commandment is that I shall not plunge a knife into my neighbor's heart. Yeah, I shouldn't, but surely there's more encompassed here than just that. And why is it that I shouldn't do that? Well, it turns out that lies of any sort tend to be very damaging, and lies of the sort that are described in the eighth commandment are particularly damaging. The eighth commandment says you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. So it's false witness. Now witness, the word witness conjures up a more formal setting. It's not that I shouldn't go around saying things that aren't true. It's that as a witness, I am providing testimony that is going to affect my neighbor. So we have envisioned not necessarily a formal courtroom scene like we might imagine when you're called as a witness and sworn in, but we might imagine some kind of formal or public proceeding where I am being asked to bear witness regarding my neighbor, and my witness is going to affect my neighbor, and I give a false witness to harm my neighbor, against your neighbor. Let's draw an analogy here. The fifth commandment says I must protect my neighbor's body, but there are times when actually we harm our neighbor's body, but we harm them for an ultimately good purpose. So a surgeon slices into you, but the purpose isn't to tear you apart, but ultimately to bring you healing. Spanking a child may be an example of bringing pain upon somebody's behind, but the point is a larger good thing that we're trying to do. So it's not just a naked no, don't do this, but it's a concern for our neighbor's body and that we not harm that body. Here, the concern is for our neighbor also. But it is not harm to the body that we're concerned with, but harm to our neighbor's reputation, which might also end up harming their body. So the eighth commandment envisions a situation where truth has to be discovered in order to know what to do with our neighbor, and you lie, corrupt the process to the harm of the neighbor. Okay? So like with the other commandments, the eighth commandment is giving a particularly egregious example of what God does not want. But if we flip it around and say, okay, then what does God want? If the fifth commandment says God clearly does not want murder, this is just like the absolute opposite of what God wants, then what does God want? He wants human life to flourish, physical well-being for us all. Okay, he wants that. Murder is the absolute opposite of that. Well, bearing false witness in some kind of a formal setting in a way that's going to hurt my neighbor is the absolute opposite of what? When you look at it and you think about it, well, this kind of proceeding and trying to decide what to do is an element of justice. Sometimes in our society, we have to figure out what to do. What is the fair and right thing to do? Should this person be punished or not? Should this person be rewarded or not? How should they be rewarded? How much should they be rewarded? How should they be punished? How much should they be punished? Do we have the right person at all? All of these are questions of justice, and justice relies on truth. Whether the truth is the testimony of an individual or the interpretation of evidence, justice relies on truth. I mean, if you look at court proceedings and the rules of evidence and so forth, the rules of evidence really have two key ideas in mind. The primary one, that is the rules of evidence, what you can admit into court and what not. If you look at these rules, you'll realize that they're designed in general to protect the reliability of evidence. You've all heard that we don't allow hearsay evidence, and the reason for that is hearsay can't be tested, and it's notoriously unreliable. It might be true. We might even be pretty sure that a particular set of evidence probably is true, but this kind of evidence we generally don't want because it tends to be unreliable, or even if it is true, we can't test it. So it's not fair and it's not right. Okay, so that would be why. And many other rules of evidence why certain things are not allowed is because they corrupt the process by introducing doubt. Okay, we don't want that. There is a second thing in our court proceedings in our country, and that is constitutional protections. And that really has to do not so much with the individual as so much as protecting all of us from overreach by the government and things like that. But the connection between truth and justice is an important one. We can all admit and see clearly that if you're on the jury, whatever evidence you're being given to make a decision about guilt or innocence or whether somebody should pay somebody else or how much, you're really relying upon the stuff that you're being told being true. And if it isn't true, or you're not sure that it's true, the whole process can be completely corrupted. So that's a very obvious case. Right? There are they're actually just as obvious when you think about them, but less striking examples. Consider a situation where an employer is having to decide between a couple of potential, hiring between a couple of potential applicants for a job, for an important position, for example. So you're going to hire one of them and not hire the other. And the one that you hire is going to be put into a position of some importance, some responsibility. So as an employer then, how are you going to vet this person? How are you going to choose between these two? What do you need, for example? It's the word I keep using. What do you need? Truth. Okay, I need to know the truth first of all. So where are we going to get it? Where does an employer get truthful testimony regarding these two applicants to try to figure out which one should be hired or promoted and which one shouldn't? Where does it come from? References would be one. What else? Former employers got references there. Yes. Where else? Past work. Okay, so more examples of what they've done, maybe things, products that they've accomplished. What about their resume? What about an interview? Okay, so presumably we're going to have an application. It's going to have references. We may have examples of prior work, and we are going to want to interview this person. We may want to interview this person several times. The whole point is to get at the truth. Now, some of the truth is easy. What degree do you have? What was your grade point average, if that's important? What were your previous jobs? Why did you leave this job? Why did you leave that job? And they're factual information, and that's fine. Some of it is harder to ascertain. What kind of a person is this? What kind of a personality do they have? And all that kind of stuff. You can call former employers to find out, is this person easy to work with? Did they work well? Okay, so in all of this, the employer is assuming something. They're assuming that the information they're getting about each of these applicants is true and accurate. Okay? What if it's not? What if you call up previous employers and the previous employers don't tell you the truth? It's a great employee. Wonderful. And they don't tell you that they fired him because they were worthless. What happens then? What happens if we why don't people just rely on resumes? Because they lie. That's right. They have a tendency to stretch the truth, shall we say. So you have to take those with a grain of salt. There is a difference between making yourself sound really, really good and actually materially saying things that are absolutely not true. I did not graduate from that. I did not get that job. Okay, so there are lies that you're not allowed to do on a resume. And then there are others that we all kind of wink at, but we all understand that resumes, they're not really all that. What about an interview? Does a prospective employee, are they obligated to tell the truth in an interview? Gosh, you hope so. They may not. What if they don't? Well, this is kind of like with the employer references, isn't it? It kind of corrupts the process, doesn't it? The person lies. If previous references lie, if you produce fraudulent transcripts, how about that? That corrupts the process. So, what if you have one person who lies and lies and lies and lies, and the other person tells the truth? The one who lies looks better. Who might get hired? The liar might get hired, which would be a perversion of justice, because you're elevating somebody who shouldn't be elevated, and you're not elevating somebody who should. Now let's make it even simpler, okay? Let's suppose we have two people come forward, and both of them are completely honest. They have fine resumes, and their prior employers all tell the truth and everything, and you're looking at the two. And you're trying to decide which, and number one looks a little bit better, but number two gets the job, and the reason why number two got the job is they bribed. That's simple. They bribed the right person, or they were the boss's nephew. That's why. In all these cases, we sort of recognize that there is a misfiring of the process. A failure of justice. And the failure of justice in almost every case comes in a corruption of the truth. Nobody's going to say, well, I hired this guy because he bribed me. Nobody will ever say that. Bribes are, by definition, under the table. You don't let people know. Bribes happen all the time. Some of the bribes are, here is a packet with money in it, and you know what to do. Other bribes are, well, I didn't say it, and I didn't tell you, but you happen to know that I'm related to so-and-so, and if you hire me, it'll probably go well for you. And nobody actually intentionally bribed, and yet the reason you made the decision that you made was not on the basis of facts and truth, but on the basis of something else. So the eighth commandment is not just talking about truth as a sort of an abstract thing. It's talking about truth in terms of how it is the necessary lubricant to justice. And justice is the necessary thing for what? For a well-functioning social order. We all assume, this is what we teach our kids, and this is what we grow up with when we're in elementary school, and then what we tend to get disabused of as we get a little bit older and we begin to realize this isn't always the truth, okay? And that is that grown-ups in responsible positions are there because they're supposed to be, and decisions are made in a wise way. Okay? Look at our politics. What's the assumption in politics? We have two people running for Congress, and the voters have to choose between the two. Well, on what basis are we going to choose? We all know that it would be ridiculous to choose based upon which photograph you like better, which one looks better, okay? Some people might do that, but we all agree that's not an appropriate reason to do. What do we need to know? What do voters need to know before they vote for candidate X or candidate Y? It's a whole lot like a job interview, except there's another layer here, because now we want to know, right, what you support and what you don't, and how you would do it. Do voters rely upon a steady stream of sufficient number of facts and that it be true to make a good decision? What else you got? Unless you know the person personally, where do you get that information from? Yeah, news media, campaigns produce things. They may be written books. Other people will come out in support of this or that person for various reasons. Okay, each side generally is going to be connected to a political party, and that political party will be, putting out various things, and then they'll stand for various things. And so the idea is this: that we amass information about each of the candidates. We know what we want, and we know why we want it, and then the other people are arguing why they're on our side or why we should want what they want instead, and we're going to have a fine debate, right? It's supposed to be a debate, and debate is supposed to elicit the positions of the people, and we're assuming that the information we're getting is true, and that important information is not being withheld. Do we assume this? Well, we assume it if the process is working well. Do we assume it today? No, we really don't. In fact, the whole thing with politics has now become really kind of farcical in many ways. It just is a horse race, isn't it? Is there a reason why we are constantly getting polls? Why do I need to hear the polls? Why do I need to know whether my guy is ahead or behind? I mean, the thing is, it doesn't matter except that we're following. It's the horse race. What I should be getting is the information why I should vote for this one and not that one, or that one and not this one, or vote for neither, vote for this person over here. That's what I should be getting. So the whole idea in society is social order. We talk about authorities. We talk about heritage. Okay? People with authority are responsible for passing down heritage, and they're also responsible for exercising authority in their various positions. Who do we put in these positions? The basic idea is this: we want to elevate people to those positions that deserve to be elevated, right? And people who abuse their positions or shouldn't be elevated, we don't. I mean, this is really simple. Who should get an A in class? The person who works for it and does the work and does the best. The person should get that, okay? You shouldn't give a person who earned a B because they gave you $20 or $50 or whatever. You don't want to have a situation where everybody gets an A just because it's mean to give anybody less than an A. That doesn't help the situation. So in trying to determine, for a society trying to figure out how do we organize ourselves, who do we put in what positions and who do we keep there? Who do we reward and who do we punish? Let's go back to the courtroom scene. Who do we reward and who do we punish? Who do we give awards to? Who do we send to jail? Who do we give a promotion and a raise to? And who do we demote or fire? It all depends on what? Truth and people trying to make the right decisions. If that gets corrupted, the whole system from the bottom to the top becomes corrupt. And if it gets bad enough, the whole thing can collapse. So that people have no regard, no belief that anybody is in any position for any good reason. This is what happens in a lot of totalitarian societies. The people in power are not in power because they're the best for the job. They're in power because, well, they're part of the elite that get in power. Do we have that in our country? Sure. Yeah, we got it all over the place. Does that corrupt our confidence in the system? Yes, it does. Does it hurt the system? Does it hurt the system when incompetent people are promoted to places they should never have been, but because they're related to somebody or because they got money? So what we're talking about in the 8th commandment is not just you should tell the truth, but the relationship between truth and justice together and their relationship to maintaining a healthy social order. It is necessary. You take that away, and a healthy social order is not possible. That it is only the... So when you look in the Scripture, particularly Proverbs talks a lot about this. Proverbs talks a lot about the evil of a bribe. Because a bribe is an obvious, overt example of an effort to pervert what should happen. Nobody bribes if you're going to get the job anyway because you're the best one for it. You bribe because you're afraid you won't get the job because somebody else would. Or you bribe because you have to figure the other person's bribing too, which means the whole system is not functioning as it should. All right. So when we talk about the fourth and the eighth commandments, we are talking about larger issues than just our moms and dads and just not lying to my neighbor. Okay? We're talking about much bigger and much more important things. Yes, our moms and dads are part of that. Yes, lying to my neighbor is a part of that. But the bigger issue is the honoring of heritage and authority that is presented to us in our parents first, but not solely in them, and the need for justice and truth in order for society to maintain itself. Why do we want, let's ask another question real quickly before we move on. Why do we care to maintain heritage and authority? Sure, but why do we do that? Why do we care?
Why do we care?
Yeah.
Because they have the experience.
So?
Well, they can keep you from making the same mistakes they make.
Okay.
Everything collapses.
Yeah, would life be better if we just jettisoned the past, started from scratch? Be worse yet if every single generation started from scratch, right? That'd be disastrous. Is life better if there's a total breakdown of authority? Nobody's in control? It is not. It is not. Life is not better if corrupt people are elevated, if good people are fired and imprisoned. Okay? If God's goal, and the whole goal, or one of the chief goals of the moral order that God has set for us is to enhance human flourishing, then we clearly need to protect heritage, and we need to protect authority, and we need to maintain justice and truth. Do we agree with that? If you don't, we all suffer. It's not just a matter of, gee, the wrong person got hired, and that's not fair. It's that we all suffer when the wrong person gets hired. And we all suffer a lot more when we have no confidence that the right person ever gets hired. It's just all about who bribes whom first. When you have a society like that, everything goes underground, and there's no trust in anything. Our society, our culture, generally has been very, very high on the trust level until recently this has really been taking a hit. We have generally trusted those in authority to tell the truth. We always have known that there's liars. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like we were naive or anything, but generally we believed that responsible people were elevated in our society and irresponsible people generally weren't. That if you go into jail, you're probably going to jail because you did something wrong, not because you're a political prisoner. We generally believe that the government is trying to do the right thing, and we generally believe what the government is telling us. Well, what I'm saying is there's been a lot of things that have happened in the last number of years that have challenged this. And so that just sort of proves my point. Look how frightening things get when there's nobody you can listen to. Look what's happened to our media. In times past, our media has been something that, everybody's always had bias and but you generally believed what the news was telling you. But today, whether it's true or not, people don't believe what the news is telling them. Now, maybe the news is telling them true. It doesn't matter. People have such a lack of confidence that whether what they're saying is true, that system begins to break down. It wasn't long ago that people had almost total confidence in the medical establishment, not necessarily always to get it right, but that they were confident that they were being good researchers and honest, unbiased, straight shooters in what they think is true. Now, a lot of people don't believe that now. It's probably still usually the case, but you've heard the expression, a little leaven leavens the whole lump, right? A little lie here or there, especially one that seems to get the backing of everybody, and pretty soon nobody believes anything. And that is bad for us all. Okay. So the fourth and the eighth commandments. Now, here's the thing that I want to talk about today, and it's based upon the fourth and the eighth commandments. That's our window into it. And that's something that we just don't often think very much about, but we should. Hugely important for moral order, it's hugely important for society, and hugely important for human flourishing, and hugely important to God. We tend to think in terms of individuals and God, individuals and one another. Okay? What we don't think about is what are called mediating institutions. Okay, mediating institutions. And I want to talk about what a mediating institution is. First off, look at how we tend to view things in terms of, and when I say politics, I'm not really meaning partisanship so much as just the American mindset in terms of how this works. We tend to think incorrectly of ourselves and the government, our relationship to the government, okay? As though that's all that matters. The government and me. But there's a whole lot of what are called mediating institutions that are between me and the government that are extremely important. And too much of our politics just forgets that. Not just the politics, but also just the sort of philosophy of life. At the founding of our nation, it may be true that the Declaration of Independence seems to speak about the government and the individual, but the founders all understood that the government was only one of many, many, many institutions and not the most important institution in anybody's life. And they understood that there were a whole lot of things that come between any individual and the government. A whole lot of things that teach us, guide us, discipline us, bless us in various ways, punish us in various ways, constrain us in various ways between us and the government. A whole lot of mediating institutions, okay? Civic groups, churches, family units are mediating institutions. Labor unions, local bridge clubs, the Rotary Club, community groups, schools, all these things are mediating institutions. They're the things that actually we interact with day by day. These are the things that really make our life or break our life, and the government is way, way, way far away. It's up there, it's doing its thing, but the thing that I'm actually dealing with is the school. The thing that I'm actually dealing with is my neighborhood. The thing that I'm actually dealing with is my own family. The thing that I'm actually dealing with is my own employer. Right? Those are the things. These are the institutions that actually impact us. These are the reasons why we behave the way we do certain things. And they're important. Church is an enormously important institution. And at the founding of our nation, all of these mediating institutions were considered to be the things that were by far and away the most important. The two most important were family and church. I mean, all the founding fathers, it didn't matter whether you believed or not, they understood that without these meeting institutions, just the individual and government, that's not what our country is. And their understanding that the government is going to have relatively little practical effect on your day-to-day life, but your church will have a huge effect. Your family will have a huge effect. Okay? Your employer will have a huge effect. Those things are really, really important. So there's been a lot of discussion over a number of years over the collapse of mediating institutions in the United States. That things have become, the idea of the individual becoming so central has resulted in a collapse of these other things. And because these other things have been collapsing, government is becoming more and more and more important, while what had been the things that sort of shielded us from that become less and less and less important. So families are becoming less important, and I don't just mean husband and wife and 2 kids. I mean the whole idea of groups of people bound together by marriage and blood are less influential in our lives than they used to be. Marriages are less durable than they used to be if they're formed at all. Families are formed without marriages routinely. And you have families where you have step this and step that and multiple steps. And these families are not nearly as durable as families used to be. So they tend to break apart and disintegrate when things go wrong. And that is a problem, because that doesn't mean families go away, but it means they're not strong enough to do what they are meant to do. Local government has become less and less and less important. A lot of people are very frustrated with schools because they feel like, it used to be the most local and most important actual thing that people really dealt with were the school boards and how the schools were run. That was really important. And many people now have a sense that school boards are no longer very important anymore because all the decisions are being made way, way up high in the federal and state level, or huge national unions and things like that. So mediating institutions, there was a book written a number of years ago. I haven't read the book. I know the general idea of the book, but it's the title that I really enjoy. And maybe you've heard of it. The book is called Bowling Alone. Have you ever heard of that? Bowling Alone. Well, the idea was bowling leagues used to be really important in our country. Lots and lots and lots and lots of people bowled in leagues. And leagues brought people together, and they drank beer, and they told jokes, and they bowled, and they had fun once or twice a week. It brought couples together. It brought people together that weren't normally together, and people got together. They also did other things. It wasn't just bowling leagues. You had, people got together to play cards, for example. That used to be much more popular in our country than it is today. And you have various things that would cause people to get together on a regular basis. And the theme of Bowling Alone, the whole idea was, those have collapsed in our country, and everybody's alone. We don't get together just for fun anymore. We don't get together for bridge night anymore. We don't just have dinner at one another's houses. We don't sit on our porches while people walk by. That just doesn't happen anymore. So everybody is just sort of in their own house and watching the TV and watching any one of their 3 million channels. But we don't engage with one another anymore. And of course now we have this thing called social media, where we have a sort of a quasi-engagement with other people, but it's got its own problems relating to truth. But the theme of this book and the idea with this book is our nation is developing a lot of pathologies because we're becoming isolated from one another because of the disintegration of things that used to hold us together. Okay? Institutions, mediating institutions. So now I'm speaking politically and sociologically. Now I'll speak theologically for a moment. We also have, so I've been talking about between government and the individual. But theologically, we'll talk about mediating institutions between God and the individual. Now, the difference here is that the government is one of those mediating institutions. Okay? So, as Christians, we don't think of government as the thing, and then we have mediating institutions between us and them. We want to think of God as the thing, and government is one of those mediating institutions. What do I mean by a mediating institution as far as God is concerned? Well, God provides, promotes, and establishes certain institutions for human flourishing. And this is how God takes care of us. So government is not there because we don't have any choice. We can't get rid of the bums. Government is there in part because God ordains that such things be, and it is for the benefit of human flourishing that there be government. As a mediating institution, God doesn't directly come to us and tell us, how to apportion our money to build roads and what the speed limit should be. Government does those sorts of things. Other mediating institutions are, as I've talked about. Churches are a mediating institution. How does God deal with you and me? Does he speak to you in your sleep? Does he just drop a Bible on your lap and say, here, read this and have a nice relationship with me? No. Churches are the way in which God interacts with his people. Another mediating institution that we'll talk about is family, marriage and family. This is an institution that God has ordained as his method for providing spiritual, emotional, and physical safety and well-being and growth for human beings. Okay? It is the ultimate safety net, and it is the single most important mediating institution for all of us. And then there are many, many others. But the point is that it's not me and God. It's me and my family, me and family, me and church, me and government, me and school, me and job, all of these things, and God is up there. Now, I have a personal relationship with him, but it's not that he shows up at the foot of my bed and talks to me. He deals with me through these other things. And my responsibility to God involves a responsibility to these other things. So that's our 5-minute warning there. Okay, so let's think about one thing that we'll say about institutions is an institution, what I'm talking about, is a thing to which we owe a duty, and it owes a duty to us. We tend to think in terms of people. I owe a duty to people. They owe a duty to me because God commands it. But I also owe a duty to certain institutions, and those institutions owe a duty to me and to us. We don't generally think about that. Sometimes we think about our duty to the government. That institution we think about. Okay. So I have a duty to be obedient, for example, be a good citizen, and that I understand. And the government has a duty to do what governments are supposed to do and not abuse that power. But there are lots of institutions that we owe a duty to, and when we abuse that or neglect that, we are sinning against God as much as if I sin against another individual. So, for example, I can sin against marriage by violating my own marriage. Okay? I owe a duty to my wife and a duty to my own marriage. I can neglect my wife, I can commit adultery, and I've committed a great sin against my wife and against my own marriage. But I also have a duty to marriage generally, even if I'm not married. Even if I am honoring my wife and my marriage, I still have a duty to uphold marriage generally. Okay? I have a duty to that. It's not just to my own. And that is an aspect of moral responsibility we tend not to think about. We tend to individualize everything. I have a family, I have a wife, therefore I have to be responsible to this person. That's true. But then there is this thing called marriage and family, and I have a duty to uphold that also. There is this thing called government. That doesn't just mean that I obey my government. It also means that I value government generally. Now, what we will see as we get more into this is that this doesn't mean that I blindly follow whatever's there. I blindly follow whatever the government hands down to me. I do not blindly follow whatever my parents taught me. I do not blindly follow any of these institutions. These institutions are to be honored, not always to be obeyed, but they also have to be maintained. And that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about is how do we maintain these things, because they don't maintain themselves. Institutions tend to degrade because they're made up of people, And they need repairs and fixes now and again. And we need to be careful how we do that, and we need to do it in a way that honors the institution. So, for example, it may mean that how marriage looks from in this generation may look different than how marriage would have looked 100 or 150 years ago. Okay? There may need to be some tweaks because the world has changed. But the basic and fundamentals of marriage and family don't change. And so whatever changes that we want to introduce into what a family is, how it operates, needs to be done with great care and honoring of the institution. Yes?
Yeah, talking back, honoring institutions and the government, father, mother. I used to think that honoring them means obey them at all costs. Do whatever they say, no matter what, even if it's evil and ungodly. But now I see.
Well, sure, that's right.
I see the difference.
I mean, Jesus himself says,
I tend to equate those.
if your mother and father, are if they're coming between you and me, you've got to choose me and not your mother and father. I mean, that's a commandment regarding mother and father, but the commandment is to honor your mother and father, and you don't necessarily honor them by following in their failed footsteps. You certainly don't want to pass that down to your own children. So there are lots of implications in all of these things. Speaking very generally about what an institution is, some institutions are very sharply defined and we know exactly what they are, and others are just much more general. But in general, they are a set of rules and expectations and relationships and attitudes. They have to do with authority, and they have to do with the transmission of values and ideas from age to age and from place to place. And they hold people together from one generation to the next, and people of different places. And as I said, they can be quite formal. Government is pretty formal. That holds us all together in a very formal way. And then other things are very informal. A bowling league would be a very informal kind of institution. Some of them are extremely important, okay, like government or family, and some of them are not that important, like bowling leagues, which we can do without. If we have to do without, we'll find another way to accomplish this. But institutions themselves are absolutely necessary for the health and well-being of a good social order. It's just necessary. And so we owe a duty not only to one another as individuals, but also to the institutions, not just to do what they say, but to maintain them. Okay? Families, your family needs to be maintained. Family needs to be maintained for a good society. All right, let me quit now. If I go any further, I'll get in trouble. We have much more to say about this, and I hope you'll find it very interesting as we go on. Lord Jesus, we thank and praise you, not only, Lord, for the individuals who care for us and that we care for, but also for the institutions you place in our lives to help and guide us, Lord, because it's not just me and you, but it's us together. And Lord, we pray that you would give us wisdom through your word, that we would understand how it is that a good, healthy social order comes together and is maintained by your word. Amen.